The east coast of the United States of America stretches almost 2,500 kilometers from Florida, through the southern states, past New York and Boston, to the Canadian border. The origins of today's America lie in New England. The region is shaped by people with a strong sense of tradition and an entrepreneurial spirit, surrounded by breathtaking landscapes. From New York, the journey along the coast leads into the heart of New England, to Boston, the capital of Massachusetts, the state whose most famous islands include Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. New Haven, in the state of Connecticut, is a place that proudly remembers the time when the former British Crown colony became a part of the independent United States. The cityscape is dominated by Yale University. Founded more than 300 years ago, it's one of the best educational institutions in the world today. Ivy League universities such as Yale have trained generations of future politicians, judges, and economists. Maddie Lips comes from Colorado and is studying political science at Yale for 4 years.
It's really, really old, and the buildings are beautiful, so you get this sense of this tradition of education and, you know, just sort of excellence that is inspiring and sometimes daunting.
Yale's 11,000 students have great career prospects, but only 1 out of every 10 applicants is lucky enough to be accepted here.
You have to work really hard in high school, and there's a lot of competition to get your spot at Yale. But I've noticed that once people sort of have that spot, they tend to relax and actually enjoy their studies and take a breath from the hectic competition of getting here.
Sports play an important role at top American universities. The entrance to Yale's gym is designed in an eye-catching Gothic style. It's one of the largest in the world. Maddie spends more time here than in lecture rooms. She's a member of the US Junior National Rowing Team. At Yale, she benefits from professional-level training conditions. Only the most talented students manage to grab a seat in the university's legendary 8-man boat. Maddie was selected as the captain of this year's team.
We pretty much work out twice a day, every day on our team. It's a very simple formula. The more time you spend working out, the faster you'll be. So pretty much do everything that hurts.
Yeah, but don't let your shoulder.
6 times a week, the rowing team heads out on the water for training. The Yale rowing team was the first college sports team in the US. Since then, the university has invested heavily in its strong athletic program.
All right, let's just do a little placement work and then we'll get going. So let's come up level.
In no other sport is New England's appreciation of tradition more apparent. The annual regatta between the Yale and Harvard men's crew has been contested since 1852. Since the 1970s, the women's teams compete in an annual dual race, which Maddie and her team won last year.
Rowing is a very interesting sport. It attracts a certain type of person, I think, who really enjoys, you know, doing something repetitively over and over again, like seeing yourself become faster as you do that. It's kind of like an addictive sport, actually, in that way, because you're always trying to get faster and always trying to improve. The boat starts moving and you feel the flow and the rhythm of the boat. That is an amazing feeling. There's nothing like it.
Being a member of the Yale 8 means rowing for the university's reputation. That's incentive enough for the students to dedicate themselves to meticulously improving their strokes in harmony with each other.
I want to go third 6-5 stroke, pause, body angle, tunnel.
If you don't row with the boat and row cleanly and with good connection to the water and everything, you'll lose to other athletes who may be weaker but better technical rowers. Rowing has given me a lot of confidence. It's a battle in your own self daily that defines who I am, I think.
At race pace, the rowers test their limits. And they also experience what it means to be successful as a team. Despite the tough training, Maddie loves her sport.
I definitely see myself rowing forever. You know, I want to be one of those 90-year-old people in a single, just still rowing, just for personal enjoyment.
From Connecticut, the route leads to the neighbouring state of Rhode Island, straight into Narragansett Bay, the largest estuary in New England. 90 lighthouses dot the coast between New York and Boston. The unusual New London Ledge Lighthouse warns ships about shelves of rock in the mouth of the Thames River. A bit further upriver lies Groton's shipyard complex. For more than 100 years, US Navy submarines have been manufactured here. During the Second World War, a new submarine entered the sea every 2 weeks. Today, more than 18,000 people work on building and repairing submarines in Groton. Historic Mystic Seaport recounts stories of shipbuilding in the olden days. The Joseph Conrad first launched in 1882 as a training vessel. Narragansett Bay is located in the smallest US state, Rhode Island. There are more than 30 islands in the bay. One of them is where Dave McCurdy is heading. From Newport's harbour, it takes him only 15 minutes to reach Rose Island. And still, the trip to the tiny island with the lighthouse is like a journey into another world.
When I stay here, it's like going back in time. There's no cell phone coverage and there's no internet. There's no vehicles on the island or anything, so you really are isolated out here, and it's fun.
The history of New England is ever present on Rose Island. Dave takes care of the lighthouse, which was built in 1870. This makes him part of a long line of lighthouse keepers, performing this duty here in the middle of Narragansett Bay.
Staying here by myself is awesome. It's just fun. It's quiet, and there's nobody to bother you. Plus, I feel like The torch has been passed to me as a keeper to take care of this lighthouse. And so I can experience what it was like to be back in 1912 in that time frame.
Lighthouses are often shrouded in legend, which might have something to do with their isolated locations. Rose Island is no exception.
We believe we have a keeper who takes care of the lighthouse, and his name is Charles Curtis, we think. And he was a keeper who took care of the lighthouse for the longest period of time, right at the turn of the century, around 1900. People have felt a presence here, and one day a gentleman took a photograph of a picture on the wall, and the picture reflected somebody sitting in a chair in the corner of the room that wasn't in the room when he took the picture. And he had a long handlebar mustache, and he looked a lot like Charles Curtis. And we love the thought that he's still here. I've stayed here by myself many times and never experienced him, so I'm hoping to introduce myself.
Lighthouse keeper on Rose Island, a job with unique challenges.
I think being alone is something that certain people don't like. I love it, frankly. It's fun. There's so much noise on shore. When you come here, it's just peaceful.
The lighthouse itself still guides ships safely through Narragansett Bay, just as it did 100 years ago. Dave's main task is to maintain the beacon.
The spray out here goes sideways, and so the waves break, and we can get salt water on our windows easily, and those windows can get covered. Yeah, cleaning the lens and the light is important, and the windows, unfortunately.
In the 19th century, America's moneyed elite discovered the region around Newport. Some of the grandest mansions in the country can still be found here today. Europe often served as an inspiration, as in the case of this Italian Renaissance-style palace. Architecture as an expression of the desire of America's wealthy to imitate and outdo the old world. A few kilometers further on, the stables of one historic property were not changed into luxury dwellings as so many others in the area were. They continue to be used for farming. Some animals that have come all the way from the Andes have found a new home on Aquidneck Island. The 60 alpacas belong to Ann Tarsagian and her husband Kevin. They have dedicated their lives to raising alpacas.
With alpacas, the first thing that you would think of when you meet them is they're very smart. Second to that is every single one is unique into itself. Now, alpacas are very, very friendly and calm and gentle, and they have personalities and quirky characteristics, like a bunch of children in the field.
Last night, the herd grew once again. The newest member is just 8 hours old.
Every single alpaca that is born on this farm is a beautiful experience for us. You would think you would get tired of it. I can't tell you, we've seen hundreds, and it seems like everyone is just as special as the one before. So their first reaction is to stand up, and I call it the drunken sailor, and there's really long legs and a long neck. So a lot of times you're holding your breath thinking they're gonna get hurt. They don't, they make it.
Anne used to sell architectural antiques. In 1998, her husband brought the first alpacas to the farm. The couple had found their new calling.
When we started, there were no how to do this or no schools. And you learn by hard knocks. The beginning was tough. It was very tough. We actually learned with the veterinarians. So there was a lot of heartbreak. There was a lot of success. We forced ourselves to train ourselves. It was actually great fun learning.
Each morning, the entire herd is let out to graze. And each morning, the animals are raring to go. Despite many obstacles, Anne and Kevin have successfully turned their farm into a sustainable business. For instance, they've had to prevent the construction of a coastal road that would have cut through the historic pasture.
We're a very small state. We have very expensive real estate. There's not much farmland. The fact that we can maintain the integrity of this property, I think, is a plus for many generations to come. I hope it'll be an example for other Rhode Islanders and people from all over to be able to come here and say, look, Rhode Island saved a piece of this culture, a piece of history.
The farm's location right on the coast is ideal for alpacas. A light sea breeze keeps the animals cool despite their thick coat. They're sheared only once a year. Animals with especially high-quality fleece are paired up for breeding. But the mating is not always without protest.
Alpacas have another funny characteristic, and that is that when they're pregnant, a female will spit at a male. So a lot of times, to make sure that our females are pregnant, we'll actually take them into a pen with a male, and the poor guy's ego, but he gets spit at, and immediately we remove them, and it's obvious that that female's then pregnant.
This female doesn't spit and allows the male to do as he pleases. The whole thing lasts about 45 minutes. The fibre of a single alpaca weighs about 4 kilograms. One fleece is worth around $700, unprocessed.
The characteristics of alpaca wool that really separate it from cashmere and other fibers is that it has no lanolin, so it's hypoallergenic, and it's fire resistant naturally. It's stain resistant naturally, so you can go out and have a glass of red wine and spill it and it'll come out the next day. And also alpaca fiber is extremely, extremely warm. I think it's almost 5 times warmer than wool. And then the best part, of course, is it's luxuriously soft. Look at the greasy tips. I think what I like most about being an alpaca farmer is that every day I go to work with 60 plus employees. I've never had one of them not show up, talk back to me. It's the easiest, most enjoyable thing I've ever done. I'm living a dream.
The journey continues to Massachusetts, with its vacation paradises of Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, up to the easternmost tip of the state, the Cape Cod Peninsula. In the port of New Bedford, A massive fleet of boats hauls in almost $370 million worth of fish and other seafood per year. A flight over Martha's Vineyard, the third largest island off America's east coast, is one of the country's most desirable vacation spots. The year-round population of 16,000 swells to 100,000 over the summer. Like John F. Kennedy before them, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama enjoyed retreats on the island. Those who don't have yachts take the ferry to cover the 160-metre distance to offshore Chappaquiddick Island. The coastline of Martha's Vineyard is more than 100 kilometres long. The clay cliffs of Aquinnah are protected by law. Strictly no trespassing. Living on the beachfront is a dream of many Americans. Though on Martha's Vineyard, that involves a distinct problem: erosion. For this builder, the waterfront location spelt disaster. Now his entire estate needs to be shifted, 100 metres inland. Very few can afford such an expense. On the neighbouring island of Nantucket, dozens of houses are at risk. The sandy cliffs lose several centimetres each year. A solid solution to counter this problem has yet to be found. Nantucket became famous as the whaling capital of the world. Until the mid-19th century, whale oil was traded as a valuable fuel and brought wealth to many islanders. Some of the buildings from those golden years still remain today. Alan Reed likes to explore the island on his Russian Ural motorcycle.
And I spend a lot of time driving around Nantucket, looking at other people's gardens, looking at other people's houses. My favorite part of Nantucket is the architecture. Everything is very aesthetically pleasing for me. No traffic lights, no neon signs. The houses, some people say it's boring, but I like that they all look a little bit similar, but to me they all look very different.
Alan first came to the island in the 70s and stayed. He became a master of a trade which is held in high regard on Nantucket. The so-called lightship baskets once were produced by seafarers during their winter downtime. Although necessary materials were in short supply on the island, Nantucket's basket weavers soon achieved a standard of quality that's unparalleled in the world. For his work, Alan Reed needs one thing above all: plenty of time.
The baskets that I make are primarily about is attention to detail. And so I like making everything perfect. I like doing the really tiny, tiny staves with the tiny, tiny weaving. People come in here all the time and ask me, how can you be that patient? I could never be that patient. And I look at them and say, I'm not a patient person. I'm really, you know, in certain aspects, I guess with baskets I am, but I think that also, not being a very patient person myself, makes me even more efficient and more meticulous with the making of the basket, because I want to get it done as fast as possible.
Alan used to work as a boat builder. Shortly after his arrival in Nantucket, a friend suggested he take a basket weaving course.
I went down, and there's this little building downtown, and I walked up the stairs. I'm 24 at the time. There's a room full of 50 and 60-year-old women. And I looked around and said, no, I can't do this. And so I just took all the supplies and went home and sat down in my living room and figured it out and just did it.
He requires about 40 hours to make a small-sized basket. In New England, lightship baskets are popular gifts for weddings or baptisms. Collectors from around the world pay thousands of dollars for one of Alan's baskets, embellished with fine old ivory engraving.
On Nantucket, it's a very respected profession. But leave the island, and he says, oh, you make ladies' handbags? You know, what's up with that? You know, but here, yes, it took me probably 20 years to really get a huge recognition.
Besides Alan, there are only a handful of basket makers left on the island. The traditional craft is facing grim prospects.
Everybody on Nantucket making the baskets right now is all about my age, just under 60. And we've kept it going for 170 years now. Where's it going to go? Is it just going to end?
At 5 in the morning, fishermen at the port of Chatham on Cape Cod set off for their fishing grounds in the Atlantic Ocean. Bob Keyes is one of them. He specializes in scallops. Scallop fishing is a booming industry. It's mostly handled by large ships, which stay at sea for several weeks. Bob's is one of the small boats. He took over the business from his father. The spot that Bob has in mind today lies about 50 kilometers off Cape Cod. The journey out there takes several hours. Bob himself constructed the metal dredge which he uses to catch the shellfish. For the next 20 minutes, the dredge will be dragged across the ocean floor.
I think people get into fishing for almost the same reason, you know. It's you get to be out on the water and, you know, not stuck in an office somewhere. And with scalloping, this type of scalloping where it's a small boat and you leave in the morning, you're back in the evening, and you still have kind of a normal life.
Bob's nephew Nate and boatman Dimitru have been setting out with him for years. Together, they make a great team. While the boss operates the winch, his colleagues tend to the dredge containing their catch. With this fishing method, large stones are an unwelcome bycatch. But smaller mussels, as well as other sea creatures, are mostly spared.
Scalloping is a very sustainable fishery. I think the proof is now there are more scallops than there ever was. The smaller the dredge is, the easier it is for fish to escape it. And then the slower you tow, the easier it is for fish to get out of the way. And typically these smaller boats tow at a much slower speed than the bigger boats, you know. But all of scalloping, as a rule, I think is a pretty clean fishery. Usually where scallops are, there's really not much else.
While the dredge again slides across the bottom of the ocean, the fishermen are busy shucking the shellfish. Especially in Europe, scallops have become a popular delicacy.
This is what they call the roe. And some countries, they do eat that, you know, the roe, during certain times of the year. But around here, they only want the meat. So you get rid of the whole scallop, except for just the meat. But some people will eat the whole thing. I remember there was a lady from Greece at the dock one time. And she's like, where's the scallops? And we showed them to her, you know, and she said, what do you do with the rest of it? And we throw it over. She said, oh, what a waste, you know?
Small-scale scallopers like Bob are struggling to survive ever since the government allowed trading of the highly coveted licenses. Many fishermen have now joined forces.
Once your quota or license becomes a commodity, eventually they end up in the person's hand with a lot of money, or a big company, you know, owning a bunch of boats. We are trying to find ways to fight against that, but it's an uphill battle, and no one really has a clear-cut answer.
There's not much time for breaks. A daily round often lasts more than 12 hours. Bob is committed to ensuring that scallopers like himself are not disadvantaged in relation to the large fishing fleets. While others sell their licenses, he wants to make sure that his business stays in the family as long as possible.
I guess you feel like it's an honest living, you know? It's real tangible. You go out there, you have a visible product, and it's kind of like the harder you work, the more money you make. You know, you see, you're taking a product from the ocean and bringing it home and selling it for what it's worth.
He gets about $700 for a sack of scallops, a bit more than his competition from the big ships, as Bob delivers them freshly caught, not frozen. A welcoming committee on the way back. Not far from Bob's home port, seals have found a haul-out site. Around 15,000 grey seals live off Cape Cod. After being nearly wiped out in the area, the seals were given legal protection in the 1970s. Since then, their numbers have steadily increased. Andrea Bogomolny works as a pathobiologist. Today, she has a group of some 500 common and grey seals in her sites. The scientist is not seeking to make contact with the seals themselves. Rather, she's after their feces.
So I became interested in seals to learn about contaminants and what was happening in our ecosystem. And it's another way that we can interact and understand these animals in a better way. Everybody says you are what you eat, and what better way to find out what you eat than kind of what got left behind. So this is a lot more of a sample than we would need, but I'm taking this sample because there's hard parts in it which are really good for diet analysis. So if I take this sample, you can even see there's some little parts to it. Hopefully we can tell what these seals are eating. So I'm going to collect the entire sample, or most of it anyway.
Seals are bioindicators. Their physical conditions help scientists like Andrea understand the state of the marine ecosystem.
We're at Head of the Meadow in Truro, and this is an area that the gray seals have started to haul out on over the last couple of years. It's a place where they can sit and rest and just be before they go out into the water and go forage for fish.
Some of Cape Cod's residents consider the presence of the seals to be a problem. They fear the marine mammals may attract sharks to the shores. Even some of the fishermen are wary.
The conflicts have been a perception with fisheries a lot of times that they might be eating a lot of commercially important fish, which we're finding out that they don't. So a lot of it is educating the public as to what's a perception and what's actually a problem. And what may actually be a problem may be something that is fear or the unknown rather than what is actually a problem. The ocean is something I don't think I could live without. I think it's what we don't know. It's almost like stepping into another planet when you go out into the ocean. And it's something that we have yet to discover so much about that really intrigues me.
Andrea has the privilege of doing her research at a world-renowned oceanographic institute. It was at Woods Hole that scientists developed the deep-sea vehicle that discovered the wreck of the Titanic. Andrea analyzes the samples from the last field trip to determine whether there's evidence of interaction between the seals and humans.
In the scat sample, we're looking for different parasites or pathogens that might be seal-specific or come from humans as well. And we're also trying to collect these samples for other researchers who might be studying diet.
At Woods Hole's state-of-the-art facility, Andrea is preparing to perform a necropsy. This seal was found dead by people strolling along the beach. About 30 seals end up in the Institute each year. There are many different causes of death, such as trauma and infectious disease.
One of the ways we can find out maybe what happened to an animal is looking at the overall skin, the outside of the animal. And on this animal, there's some indication that there's lines present, very, very fine lines or impressions. And because of that, I think this animal was most likely incidentally bycaught in fishing gears. I think is the #1 cause of mortality in gray seals. From the stranded animals we see, it's actually entanglement in human interactions. So it's a big problem. I do have to separate sometimes the living seal from what I have in front of me. So by learning from one animal, you can learn a lot about the ones that are alive and healthy and happy. So that's how I see it. It's a way to help those that are still alive.
From Cape Cod, the journey continues north, past Plymouth, where almost 400 years ago the first colony in New England was founded. The destination is Boston, cradle of the American independence movement. Because real estate prices on Cape Cod have been increasing for years, some people have chosen to settle in the region's countless small coves. An artificial canal separates Cape Cod from the mainland. The vertical lift bridge from 1935 allows for smooth operation of shipping activities, while also providing a rail connection for the peninsula. Some 20 kilometers from the shore, Dawn Gates Allen sets off to her bogs. It's mid-October, the most crucial time of year for the farmer. Only once a year does she open the floodgates of her water reservoir. Dawn cultivates cranberries. The berries grow in large bogs, which are flooded once the crop is ripe in October. Cranberry farming requires nerves of steel.
Our production is once a year, our harvest is once a year. So we can make one major mistake, and it could be just a fluke of nature with Mother Nature. It could be a hailstorm, rain, any type of weather condition that can destroy our crop.
Cranberries originally come from Massachusetts. The nutrient-rich fruit was already on the menu of the area's native tribes. During the wet harvest, the farmers take advantage of one of the berry's unique properties.
What you can see is the shape of the berry. It's wax coated, and it's also hollow inside. The air inside the cranberry actually makes it float, and the pulp of the skin is airy as well.
Dawn has only 2 days to gather all of the red berries. For smaller entrepreneurs, the harvest is a logistical challenge. Several farmers take turns using the costly pumping system. Capacity building, characteristic for this part of New England.
In Massachusetts, we probably have a very stoic personality, lots of tenacity. We have to be engineers, we have to be plumbers, we have to be just crafted in all areas of labor because we're so unique. We don't have companies that build our equipment for us. We have to build our own equipment.
Farmers like Dawn in Massachusetts bring in more than 200,000 tons of cranberries each year. The vitamin-rich fruit is mostly turned into juice, jams, and cranberry sauce. The harvesting days are long. Friends, family, and neighbors, everyone pitches in.
We're really fortunate that we can all support each other and pat each other on the back at the end of the day and say you did the best you could on your crop, and we always feel like there's next year.
All year round, everything revolves around the cultivation of the cranberry bogs. Dawn and her brother were one of the first to utilize the remote-controlled irrigation system. Innovation inspired by Massachusetts' red jewels.
I think the best part about my job is I don't even think of it as a job. I keep referring to it as a lifestyle. It's a privilege to be a cranberry grower supplying a fruit that has so many health benefits that's becoming global.
A few kilometers further, a replica of the Mayflower serves as a reminder of the first European settlers who came ashore at Plymouth in 1620. Most of the 102 passengers were religious dissenters from England. Only half of them survived the first winter. But despite the setbacks, the newcomers managed to establish a permanent settlement. They founded a colony with a democratic constitution and found a new homeland. The settlement at Plymouth is considered to have sown the seeds of the American nation and manifested the strong community spirit that the people of New England still cherish today. Many Americans try to trace their genealogy back to one of the Mayflower's passengers. The biggest city in New England was founded just 10 years after the Mayflower's arrival. Boston is, after New York City, the most important cultural center on America's East Coast. The metropolis is home to renowned universities such as MIT and Harvard. And it was in Boston where, almost 250 years ago, the Americans revolted against British colonial power. Since then, the city has been a symbol of American independence. More recently, a small green revolution has been taking place on the rooftops of Boston. Organic farming right in the middle of the city. The trend is especially appealing to restaurants, which can offer homegrown produce to their guests. Boston's urban farming pioneer is Jessie Van Hazel. Her company can provide customers with anything needed for cultivation. Jessie also advises in the selection of appropriate seasonal varieties.
The heirlooms are hard on the roof. Why use rooftops? Because it's unused space. When you're in such a densely populated city like Boston, there isn't a lot of available space. Sometimes the back alleys or the yards are shaded by other buildings. And so a roof gives you a big, open, large amount of square footage and a full sunlight typically. And so it's an ideal area for growing food.
Tomatoes, courgette, broccoli. In 1 year, more than a ton of homegrown vegetables ends up in the restaurant's dishes.
We currently provide 75% of the produce that the restaurant uses during the course of the growing season. We're here weekly providing maintenance, harvesting, and bringing all the food down to the kitchen operation.
In the middle of Boston, Jessie has created her own green empire. 5 years ago, she founded a company that's committed to organic rooftop farming in the city. Jessie's idea has struck a chord with Bostoners. She was recently named one of the top 30 young business leaders in the city.
Food systems in the U.S. are pretty broken. We have a lot of foodborne illnesses that start in these big factory-farmed plants. And so, growing food and growing food locally and growing food for yourself is a really, really clear solution for those issues.
Jessie and her staff provide know-how and materials to companies and individuals. This includes environmentally friendly organic fertilizer and suitable soil, as well as customized planting boxes. There's a lot of unused space in the city. Jessie constantly develops new approaches for feasibly implementing additional urban farms. Her biggest project so far involved teaming up with a national supermarket chain.
What's great about working with supermarkets is that they have these huge footprints. And so, it's a 45,000 square foot building that we just took half the roof up for the farm. And what's great is that they use all the produce. And so they sell the food, and then anything else that they don't sell, they put into the prepared food section at the grocery store. And so everything's being used.
Through her work, Jessie has succeeded in raising the nutritional awareness of many Bostoners.
I am definitely a city person, not a farm. I mean, I am a farmer, but I'm an urban farmer. So I live a very city life. I love my comforts and the convenience of living in the city. And I also love that you can do agriculture and live in the city.
A pioneering spirit, an inquiring mind, and a healthy optimism. The American spirit is multifaceted. Along New England's coast, it's been ubiquitous for centuries.